Welcome to a new episode of All That Jazz. I'm your host, Matyash, and I have with me Jerry Teplitz, who is a man that I wanted on my podcast for a very long time. I know him through the connection of David Hawkins, and he's most well known to the book Switched On Living, Switched On, Switched On Networking, and Managing Your Stress managing your stress level in times of stress or something. Oh my gosh, sorry I butchered you. managing managing your stress in difficult times. I'm sorry, I can't read my writing sometimes. Welcome, Jerry.
Well, thank you.
that was a stressful moment right there. That's a
Ab-
teaching moment.
Absolutely.
so I understand that you have I really like this distinction because instead of muscle testing that David Hawkins called, you call it muscle checking.
Yeah. So, would your audience know what muscle testing is or muscle checking is, or do you want me to explain what it is first?
Maybe a third will know,
Okay.
roughly speaking. Yeah.
Okay. So, let me start with an explanation of what muscle checking is, and then I'll tell you why I call it muscle checking versus muscle testing. And so with muscle checking, what you're doing is the person you're working on, and you can do self-checking also. We can get into that later. But if you're checking somebody else, you'd have them put their arm out with the thumb turned downwards. Pardon my big expression in everybody's face with
Right.
my arm,
Thumb
and
down.
it would be to the side of the body. So it's like they went that way. That's the direction it would be. And I'll move over just a little bit in my chair so you can see a little better. And I'm going to have my thumb pointing downward. So that's the person I'm working on. What I'm doing is I'm placing one hand on their opposite shoulder that the arm is not out on, just to keep them level. The other hand's right by their wrist bone. And then I'll say ready, resist. And I'm asking them to push up and I'm pushing down, not attempting to force their arm down, but what I'm attempting to do is measure their level of resistance. Everybody has a level of resistance, whether it's a little kid on up to an elderly person. They will have a level of resistance that you're measuring. So it's not looking at brute force. I'm going to
Right.
whack all the way down. And so then we can. So what this is, it's a measurement of what's going on in your body using your arm as a representation of that. And so, for example, I would then have, as an example, have somebody think of a negative, stressful thought. And when they have that focused, they would, with their eyes closed, they would shake the head. So I know they've got it. I would say, ready, resist. And what would happen with their arm is it would come plunging down, with me actually putting way less pressure on it. I'd have them think of a very, very positive thought and say, ready, resist, and check them. And their arm will actually be physically stronger than when I just measured them in neutral. When I'm doing a live program, which because of COVID, I haven't done it in quite a while,
Right.
but when I do a live program, I actually have a meter that can measure the pressure differential. So, for example, I might measure them initially, and they may be at, say, 10.6 kilograms of pressure. And then when I have them think of that negative thought, they may drop down to 4 or 5 kilograms of pressure. And when I have them think of the very, very positive thought, they may have gone up 4 or 5 kilograms of pressure. So there's an actual measurement that we're actually able to do to facilitate and understand what's going on in the body. Negative thoughts is just one example of that. And so we can look at all kinds of things as to how they impact you, how you're impacted by them, and and then we show people how to prevent themselves from being zapped in the first place by what goes on around them.
So
So
it's not
now
that you're biased.
going into that long explanation, Why do I do call it muscle checking versus muscle testing? That's because words also have an impact. Words can be positive, negative, or neutral. So think when people say stuff to you and it's all negative, how do you feel, Matt, with that stuff coming at you?
I don't like it. I remove myself, or I just I'm I feel very negative towards a person. There could be a resentment, depending how the level of what it's said.
Yeah.
You know, could be.
And what about when somebody says very positive things about you, like, I love your podcast?
Yeah, usually good, and sometimes suspect. Sometimes I'm like, is it really true what they're saying? But usually it's very positive. Yes.
Good. And you feel very different than you did with the negative stuff coming at you.
Yes.
So words have an impact. See, if I muscle checked you when somebody was saying negative words to you, your arm would actually come down uh, very easily. I'm actually putting way less pressure on somebody's arm when the negative stuff happens. With positive stuff, it would stay rock solid. And so when you say the word test, think back to school days. Weren't you excited to have to go into class to take a test?
No.
No. And so test people view as a negative word. So if I say, I want to do some muscle testing on you, it's a negative word that you're throwing in there. But if I say, I want to do some muscle checking on you, it's a neutral word. It doesn't have an impact on you. So that's kind of the subtlety that I've looked at with this work as to how we need to phrase things. There's a whole course I give that's called Creating High Energy Websites and PR Materials, where I've got a video of that course where people can actually learn how they can muscle check the energy of what they're looking at website wise, PR wise, um, book covers. Did you ever hear of the book series Chicken Soup for the Soul?
Yes. Jack Canfield, right?
Exactly. Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. They're both good friends of mine. Years ago, I was at a convention, American Booksellers Convention, and I was promoting one of my books. And Jack and Mark were there promoting uh, the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book. And so I said, I can muscle check the energy to see the book cover. And so we muscle checked it, and it was high energy. And what I mean by high energy, when people looked at it, it actually created energy, a positive energy in their body beyond where they were at that moment. Somebody else was at the party. They also had a book cover. And so we muscle checked that, and that was totally switching everybody off. And when I do this, I did this more than just with one person. I did it with multiple people. And we didn't tell them what we were looking to have happen. We just said, here, look at this. They looked at the cover and I muscle checked them. And so Jack actually started using me to check every Chicken Soup for the Soul book cover. And literally, he says publicly he would not publish a Chicken Soup book until it's gone through the process I developed to make sure it is high energy. They're now up to a 500 million books
It's
that they
amazing.
sold.
It's amazing, really. Can you also check the content of the book itself, or is that a different process?
No, it's the content also has an impact as well, and we did that for one of somebody was doing a chapter for Chicken Soup for the Soul, and we were able to hone in on a page and what was wrong with it, so that they're actually able to change the language there. So yeah, it's easy to do it in that kind of a fashion. One of the other people, and you're familiar with, is David Hawkins. and power versus force. And so why don't you tell the story of what David said about my work, so it comes from you and not me.
So basically, David recommended your work because it's like the basis of basically like kind of like what John Diamond was talking about, like your body doesn't lie, that there's an innate uh, response of the body to what David Hawkins called above 200, which is the level of, for those of you who don't know, level 200 is the level between negative and positive. So what's above, it's positive. What's below 200, it's negative. So with the muscle checking, you're able to get what what is above and what is below. And he recommended your book several times throughout the especially the 2002 lecture series, which I highly recommend, and your book as well. So it came recommended highly. So that's why a lot of doc students are familiar with, I say doc students, Dr. Hawking students are familiar with your book.
Yeah, and the book, by the way, that one is called Switched On Living.
Yes.
Switched On Living. And so, what Hawkins, by the way, for people who may not be aware, he had a scale set from 0 to 1,000, and 1,000 being the highest in terms of consciousness levels, like a religious, the religious leaders, Jesus and Buddha, and all those folks would be hoovering up there. And below 200 is where you move into the negative uh, folks, like Hitler and other dictators would be down at the bottom. And
Yes.
so David, in his work, didn't teach muscle checking, so he actually sent them to my stuff to actually learn how to do the muscle checking. So and I did an infomercial many years ago on Switched On Living, and we still have all the products available, videos and audios, and the book. And he actually did a video testimonial um, uh, on on that infomercial for me as well.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that on YouTube. Okay. So let me ask you about something that may happen with muscle checking, is that sometimes people are reversed, as it's so called, which means that they go positive with something that's negative and negative with something that's actually positive. So how can you rectify that if you can?
So with reversals, and you're exactly right, where if they said their name, for example, their arm would come down, meaning it's not their name. And so that's just a simple example.
Right.
And so there are a number of things that you can do, and these come from an area that I work in called brain gym. Brain gym uses very simple body movement exercise that actually create new neuron nets in the brain in minutes. And it was developed by Dr. Paul Dennison and his wife Gail. And Dennison had a Ph.D. in education, and he was working with children and adults with learning disabilities, where you can take D and F graded students and using the brain gym work, actually move them up to becoming A-level students in a semester, because movement actually is key to learning. Um, think of how a little baby learns uh, languages. They're running around, playing, crawling on the floor. They're not sitting at a desk and looking at words, but they learn languages through the body. And Dennison actually um, was working at that time with John Thie, who developed Touch for Health, and some other folks. And so he put this into the work called Brain Gym, and I've been involved with them for many years and have been on their board of directors. I'm still on it. I'm on it again. So total of about 14 years, 15 years, I've been on their board of directors. And I've also created business classes, uh, using this brain gym work that we can talk about a little bit later. But in terms of reversals, what the brain gym folks recommend are several things that you can do, and they call it getting into pace for learning. One thing is to drink water. When you're dehydrated, and it's very easy for people to actually become dehydrated. Yeah, and I've got mine right here. So, and for people who are watching, go sip some water.
Okay, for practical level, how much? Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. How much water should people drink?
Well, the recommendation is 8 glasses a day, um, and so the recommendation is 8 glasses a day. And what my suggestion is you sip throughout the day as opposed to I'll take a glass now, I'll take a glass in 2 hours. So sipping actually keeps your brain hydrated and your body hydrated. And so drinking water becomes one that can change your reversal. You could have been dehydrated. Second thing is that we have people do is there's with the brain gym work, there's places here. It's about you have the sternum that runs down the center of the chest. You have the clavicle, the bone that's here. If you go out from the sternum
Hmm.
about an inch and a half to 2 inches on both sides, you'll find a little hollow there. And so what you're going to do is you're going to place a thumb and middle finger in each hollow. So, Matt, are you finding the hollows on you?
Yeah.
Okay. You take your other hand and just put it on your belly button, and then you would rub vigorously for about 30 seconds up here. So, this is a second way you can look at switching on reversals. A third way that you can do it is just tapping the sides of the hands together here. And you do that about 35, 45 times. And that's another way. And the last way is doing the cross crawl. Think of a drum major marching. They're taking high knee, high arm movements,
Hmm.
but you're actually touching your knee. And you do this sitting or standing. And so those are some of the things that you can actually do if you're in a situation where you have somebody who is reversed. And the way you figure that out again is have them say their name. And if their arm comes down, they're probably in reversal. After doing these things, you go back and have them say their name again, and they should be fine.
Have you found any people that cannot do these things, that they constantly get the results wrong, or there's something other than that's wrong? Then they're not switched, or maybe they're switched, but there's something else that's also wrong that's preventing them to be normally switched. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so just so you're aware, I don't tend to do the muscle checking all that much in a medical kind of healthcare situation. I'm using it more in the business arena. So I'm doing seminars and programs and keynotes at conferences where I'm introducing this in terms of like at a conference, we might use the title of increasing your brain's performance for greater leadership success or greater sales success or professional success. And the concept there is I start out by saying, how many of you ever had a negative day at work? And I have them raise their hands, and everybody chuckles a little bit. And I'd say, how do you feel at the end of that day? And people will shout out things like drained, tired, and exhausted. Then I'll ask them how many people had a very positive day at work or as a leader or as a salesperson. And um, hopefully everybody raised their hand. And then I'll ask them, how'd you feel at the end of that day? And they'll use words like up and energized. So it's very real. Negative disaster days, people are physically, mentally, and emotionally drained and exhausted. Positive days, they're energized. So the concept here is what can you do to make every day a positive day for yourself? And that's where I bring in the muscle checking and Dr. Diamond's work that I've applied in the business arena and other things that I've discovered over the years. to show people how they can actually create each day to be a very high energy, positive day for themselves. And that again is a lot of that's covered in the Switched On Living book, and some of it in the Managing Your Stress in Difficult Times book.
Touch upon. Wait, I have to wait. I'm getting feedback as I speak.
Okay.
Okay, so switched on networking, is that a book based on networking in business and how to get a good connection with other people?
Yes. So Switched On Networking, and there's another version called Switched On Selling. With those books, what I've done is I paired up with a content expert in their field. So one was a sales expert, Dr. Tony Alessandra, and the other was a expert in networking. And what they did in each chapter is they put what you ought to be doing in terms of networking or selling. And then at the end of the chapter, we basically said, were there pieces you ran across in the chapter? You had this little voice inside saying, no, no, I can't do that. No way. Have you ever read something like that, Matt, and had that kind of thought pop in for yourself?
That something's impossible, that something's way too good to be true, you mean?
Or that I just can't see myself doing that,
Yeah,
that type of
yeah,
thing?
of course, yeah.
Yeah. So we have people write those down because what they are is they are a limiting belief that you can't do that. And limiting beliefs stop you from moving forward. And so then we'll also take them through certain sentences related to what was in that section there area for them to, and we teach them how to do self muscle checking and noticing inside whether things are on or off for them. And then I'll take them through a number of the brain gym exercises that are at the end of each chapter that will then switch their brain on. So when they go back through those statements, back through what they wrote down, their response is totally different. It is borderline amazing the changes that happen. As a matter of fact, can I share a study that we did with Switched On Selling with you, Matt? So this was a study because when I first introduced the course Switched On Selling, and we did have people do a pre-seminar questionnaire and then a post-seminar questionnaire at the end of the day. And I can see very dramatic changes in what was happening. I mean, majorly dramatic. But I realized I needed to convince the world out there that this stuff is real. You know, in other words, the idea of using movement exercises to create and make changes in brain function is foreign to the most of the community out there, including until recently the scientific community, where they finally are looking at neuroplasticity in the brain and discovering things along those lines. But years ago, it would be like this kind of a thing to this work. So I decided to do a research study, and we did it over time with 695 salespeople. We not only gave them the pre-seminar questionnaire when they walked in first thing in the morning, this was a one-day seminar, we gave it to them again at the end of the day, but then we went a step further because you know how you leave seminars really excited and placebo effect might be there and just high energy might be there. And I'm sure you've had that kind of experience for yourself, right, Matt?
Yes, of course, of course.
Well, I wanted to see, was this more than a placebo effect? Was this more than just a high energy? So we collected the forms back from people, got them back to them a month later, and said, do it a third time because I wanted to get over seminar high or placebo effect, like I was just talking about. So 695 salespeople. One of the statements was, I am comfortable asking for the order and closing the sale. Now, you would view that as an important part of the sales process, wouldn't you, Matt?
Of course, of course. Very important.
Important, yeah. Well, people have a choice of strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree. Beginning of the seminar day, 52% of these real people responded on the negative, strongly disagree and disagree side.
Wow.
These are real salespeople who this is their job. And when it comes to closing the sale, they're not comfortable doing that. And guess what the client picks up from them? That they're not comfortable. And so why should I buy from you if what you're projecting is lack of comfort?
Right.
Yeah. So that was beginning of the day. Take them through every part of the selling process, the entire class, finding where they're on using the muscle checking, where they're off. By off, it means they read a statement like the one example I'm using. I'm comfortable asking the order and closing the sale. When they read that out loud, if they view that as a negative thought, their arm actually comes down very easily. And the people are working with partners, so they're doing with their partner. If they view it as a positive, their arm stays up. And so 52% of them responded negatively. We take them through the entire class, do the brain gym exercises on each part of the selling process, have them go back through the same sentences again. And when they read that sentence, I'm comfortable asking for the order and closing the sale. If the arm went down, it actually stays up now because they're no longer viewing it as a negative thought.
Wow.
Then on some people, their arms, when they said it, actually got stronger. In other words, they stayed up initially, which means they didn't view it as a negative. They viewed it as a positive, but there's degrees of positive. So we actually moved them from agree to strongly agree. So end of the seminar day, they filled out the form again. What they had was you now on the negative side, strongly disagree and disagree. You only had 8% on the negative, and they were under disagree. Nobody was in strongly disagree anymore. Now, and they had moved up on the positive, and even strongly agree moved up from 11 to about 35%. So we had lots of people who got even more positive. It was actually 18% to 35% strongly agree. So we collect the forms back, send them out to them, get them back a month later from folks. We didn't get all the forms back, but we got about a third of the forms back. And so we were able to then compare the forms we got back to the forms that we did not get back, looking at the pre and post. And because I wanted to make sure this wasn't a unique group of people who were so positive to begin with, they're the only ones who filled it out.
Right.
And the graphs on pre and post looked identical. So we knew that, in effect, everybody was responding similarly. This was not a unique group that chose to respond. So a month later, when they're back out in the field, actually doing selling, what do they observe? Well, now what would you expect to happen a month later after you go to a seminar? Would you expect it to maintain that high, or would you expect there to be kind of drop off happening?
Depends on the seminar, but usually there'll be a drop. Usually there'll be a drop. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we had them at end of the seminar day, 35% said strongly agree, 8% were disagree. So the disagree dropped down to 6%. Okay, so there was still some negative, but it was only 6%. Agree actually dropped some. But the reason why agree dropped some is because strongly agree went up. So 35% at the end of the day said strongly agree. A month later, it moved up to 50%. So we had 47% now in agree, 50% in strongly agree, 97% were now on the positive side. And in the seminar, one-day seminar, we did not teach a single technique of selling the entire day. It was a brain rewiring approach, a brain re-education approach, which then allowed them to access the pieces of selling that they may have learned in another seminar but weren't doing. They were now able to do it.
Wow. So this is a technique basically using the brain gym exercises, or is this something else? So some other techniques that you're using to change? You're basically changing the belief system of these salespeople to make them better salespeople and do better for themselves and their business.
Yeah. And so it's combining the muscle checking as the tool to get the read, and then the brain gym work to rewire and re-educate the brain, and then the muscle checking to confirm that the changes actually took place. So it's kind of a three-step process that we're doing. But let me share another piece with you, because Matt, that's looking at people's attitudes, their own internal attitude about selling. But for companies, the question would be, what about the bottom line? Was there really, I send people to training, but nothing changed. So was there actually a bottom line impact? So two stories. We had an insurance company in South Carolina called the Farm Bureau. They put half of their salespeople through the one-day seminar. Half of them did not go through it. They tracked everybody for 4 months after the seminar, looking at last year versus this year figures. People who went through this one-day seminar went up on, and in sales and insurance work, premiums is how they really define success, not just sales. On premiums, the people who did not go through the class went up 30%. The people who went through the one-day seminar went up 101%. A 70% bottom line differential between those who went through it and those who did not. Now, another company, and this is a company in Virginia. I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, in the States. And the guy, his name is Kevin Kordick. He owned a company called A-Active Termite and Pest Control. He heard me do the muscle checking program, increasing your leadership power to new levels of excellence, for a group he belonged to called Entrepreneurs Organization. And he decides to put half his sales force through the class. Now, this is in the middle of the Great Recession, around 2009. So Kevin says, I'm going to put half the sales force in the class. And I told him, so I want you to put your mediocre, mid-level folks in the class, not your top people. And we had to have actually a very long discussion on this, because when you're doing sales training, you'll tend to put the top people in because they go up a little bit. That's good for the bottom line. It took a while for me to convince him to put his mediocre mid-level folks in, but he did. And Kevin is very heavily into tracking statistics. One of the things he observed was 6 of these 8 people he put in the one-day switched on selling class immediately jumped above his top tier people.
Wow.
They actually created a higher top tier in the middle of the recession. Now, he also, so October, this was August, so October I was doing the class again. The former top tier people insisted on taking the class, and so he put everybody else through the class. And a year later, August 2010, I asked Kevin, so it's been a year, what happened? And what he said is, and now this is when most pest control companies were either going out of business or barely holding their own. And in America, we were just starting to move into slow recovery then. He said his profits doubled. He became the #1 distributor in the entire country on 2 of his high-end product lines. One of his guys jumped up over 300%. Now, of the 6 that originally took the class and jumped above their top tier folks, 2 of them, Matt, thought the seminar was a waste of time. They actually used other words for it, but I won't broadcast that.
Right.
And they thought it was a waste of time. So 4 months later, Kevin sits him down in his office and says, so here's your stats before you took the 1 day. Here's your stats since the 1 day. What changed? And even they said it was the 1 day seminar. So this is not a belief seminar. You don't have to believe it's going to work. You just have to go through the process. And that's what the book Switched On Selling and Switched On Network are doing, is taking you through the process.
So
Now,
that's
can I share one
okay.
last piece to that Kevin Kordick story?
Yes.
4 years later, he sold his company to the world's fourth largest pest control company because they wanted to know what was the secret sauce that his company had his company outperforming everybody else in his size in the industry. Now, keep in mind, I never did another training program for Kevin's people 4 years later. After the sale, he said one of the pieces of the secret sauce is 4 years before he put his people through the Switched On Selling seminar. So it was literally maintaining. And the year after the sale, new leadership, new management, new processes, they still went up 10%, and another 10% in sales.
Wow. So just because of the training years ago, then it just continued. Those people, the same people were the belief system. You basically change in 1 day workshop, you change the belief system of a whole entire small crew. I mean, probably big crew of people. And that just continued on for years and years for pest control sales.
That is correct, which makes it pretty wild.
How many hours is that? The
It's
course?
the videos on that is about, it's a 1 day seminar. So the videos run about maybe 6 hours, but then you're participating. So, but you're doing it on your, and we teach you how you can do it without a partner. So it probably takes about 4 to 6 hours to run through the class in
Right.
that range. I also have two online classes that I've developed of streaming video that's designed for people to do online. One is called Switched On Internet Marketing, and the other is Switched On Startup Entrepreneur. So what I've done is I took Switched On Selling and we redesigned it for what does an internet marketer need to know? What does a startup entrepreneur need to know and be switched on for? And we set it up as a class that they can actually go through online. And they can find that just by going to switchedoninternetmarketing.com or switchedonstartupentrepreneur.com. So switchedoninternetmarketing.com or switchedonstartupentrepreneur.com. And they can learn all about that if they're into internet marketing or if they're into being an entrepreneur and creating more success in themselves.
So here's my question: why aren't more companies using these techniques that are so obviously good? Are they just not aware that these techniques exist out there? That with muscle checking, you can check out basically the attitudes of your salespeople and the attitude, and probably you could not just salespeople, you could probably impact your company. And even if you have, like, let's say a bar, like, or a good restaurant, you could probably do it on you can modify it a little bit and somebody else could run it maybe, but similar techniques would probably work, because if it's so successful in one area, I imagine it would be in another as well, right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the other books that I did, I've done a total of 9 books over the years, is called Brain Gym for Business, that I did with Dr. Paul Dennison, who developed the brain gym work, and his wife Gail. We did as a co-authorship, where in each chapter we have the positions in an organization, each section. And under it, we broke it down by the tasks people do. And so if you have a task that, as a, say, accountant, you don't like to do, you can actually flip through the book, come to the accountant, look up the thing you don't like to do, or go into a task index if your position isn't listed there, and you'll see 3 or 4 brain gyms listed. So you just go do the brain gym. So you switch yourself on for that task. So you can actually not let yourself get stuck in anything that you're doing from a business standpoint. Now, as to why more people don't know about this, Matt, imagine I'm calling you up on the phone, okay? And I'm talking to you about what I do. And if you heard me say, well, I have people stand up, I bring people on volunteers, and I am saying, think a negative thought, and I push their arm, it goes down. I have them think a positive thought, it stays up. Then I have the whole audience stand up, and they do this on each other, and it's pretty spectacular. When do you want me to come and do the program? So the difficulty is, the way I have to sell this is through the letters of commendation I get from audience members. We always do evaluation forms of the audience and the ratings of the program. And most times I'm getting like 70+% rating and excellent, almost everybody else saying good. And this way I can present to a company. And I have my website, Teplitz.com, my last name, Teplitz.com. And it's got a video of the first 17 minutes of a live program of me doing so. If your viewers want to see what I'm actually doing in a program, they can actually go there to see that. So it's more of a difficulty of having to take people and convince them that this is real, because it is so out of the normal way of looking at how the world operates.
Yeah, I think as Dr. Hawkins' work, like Power versus Force, is extremely popular, and as that moves more and more in popularity, I think people will discover your work through podcasts like this and other stuff. Like I think there's slowly a shift towards a more holistic view of business, and not just do it one way. Attitudes are extremely important, and when you were talking about like changing attitudes, it could be just as simple as like for example, I have an issue with sometimes I'm in a university, I'm back at uni, and it's hard for me to study sometimes, so and do certain things about that. So if I apply that technique to that, it would be probably easier for me to shatter some of those attitudes and belief systems about that, and be more successful at my university work, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the other things I actually recommend is a subliminal. You talked about music earlier. One of the
Hmm.
people that I work with extensively with music is Stephen Halpern. He's kind of considered the father of new age type music, and he's created music with subliminal messages behind them. And he's got one on losing weight called Achieving Your Ideal Weight. He's got a whole range of them on enhancing creativity, um, self-healing, radiant health, but he also has one called accelerated learning. And so this has subliminal messages about being able to absorb and learn materials. Now, have you ever read a textbook because you're back in school, and you either find you have to read a page like 3 times because you finished reading it and you have no idea what it said? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, of course.
Have you also experienced when you're reading a textbook falling asleep?
Yeah, or getting really sleepy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So what's happening is you're reading textbooks that are written by people who are operating predominantly out of the left hemisphere of their brain. It's the logic, it's the rational. Have you ever read a novel that you couldn't put down, even read
Yes.
it late into the night, and
Yeah.
still feel great the next day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is somebody who's using both hemispheres of the brain. They have the left logic of the plot, but they have the moods, the feelings, the characters, the emotions. And so they're actually writing whole brain. And when we read that, it's actually activating our whole brain. When you read the textbook, it's just activating one hemisphere of the brain, which is actually creating stress for us. And the way what happens is you have to reread the paragraphs, the sentences, You fall asleep, you get tired. So accelerated learning actually switches your brain on to be able to read that material and absorb it and stay awake, which is fabulous. And so just let me give you an example. I had a woman friend of mine. I was going to visit her, and she decided to get accelerated learning, this CD, for her son. And so I came in. He comes out of the bedroom where he was studying. I need some water for a second.
Okay.
So he comes out of the bedroom, and he was studying math, and we gave it to him and said, would you, just turn this on, listen to it while you're studying. Goes back in. 5 minutes later, comes out and said, I turned this on, and all of a sudden the math made sense.
Wow.
My stepson, Adam, in my first marriage, he used it through high school, college, law school. And he met this woman in his first year of college, and they stayed together through the first year and a chunk of the second year. When they broke up, she contacted me and asked me if I could get her the accelerated learning CD, because she said when they broke up, he got custody of it.
Is that music, or is that the technique that you do?
It's music,
Mm.
but it's very gentle music. Stephen actually has gone into the laboratory, and when he's played, they've measured people's brainwave patterns, and they discovered that he's actually making changes in brainwaves. He then coupled that with this technology of subliminal messages, so there's sub-auditory. So they're not coming in through the left hemisphere of their brain, they're coming in through the right hemisphere of the brain. And so it creates this differential. I just used it about a year ago. I had hip replacement surgery, and we had to be there at 5:30 in the morning, and didn't go into surgery until about 9:30. So occasionally there'd be somebody coming in, a doc, a nurse, to do different things, getting me ready for surgery. But during this whole period, otherwise, I did two things. I meditated, and I had headsets on, and I was listening to uh, accelerated self-healing. I asked the doc if it was okay for me to have that on and playing during surgery, and he said, sure. And so it was on. I was out. They take me into recovery room, and I had it on. Take me back into the hospital room, and I'm meditating again, and have that on. And about 3:30, 4 o'clock, the uh, PT person comes in. And in order to leave the hospital, you have to be able to walk 50 feet and go up and down 3 stairs. And so they get me up, and piece of cake walking, piece of cake up and down the stairs. My pain level on all of that was 0. My pain level basically stayed between 0 and maybe 1 the entire time, and in recovery as well. And what I attribute it to is both meditating and also to listening to accelerated self-healing.
And that's not the usual process. Like, people usually have more pain with a surgery like that, especially because it's so invasive, right?
Yeah, a friend of mine who went through it, had major pain, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the probably the most important thing, because a lot of people are dealing
What
with
I mean,
stress.
this wasn't all important.
The stress in life is huge right now. I think a lot of it is distractions. I'm even myself, I'm constantly getting distracted with a lot of different things. So, and also I have a lot of different things on my plate, on my mind, etc., and that creates a lot of stress. So what is your technique? Because you wrote also a book about stress, how to deal with stress. So what is your recommendations for this?
So the book is Managing Your Stress in Difficult Times, Succeeding in Times of Change.
Yes.
And how about we put you and the viewers through an actual experience to show you how your thoughts are actually affecting the whole physiology of your body. Are you game for that, Matt?
Yes. Let's do it.
Okay. So for those who are watching, and Matt's going to do this also, where you're all going to stand up if you're in this position, you can stand up. If you're not, what I want you to do is sit towards the front of your chair. And then I'm going to have you think of a negative, stressful thought. Your eyes will be closed. And then I'll ask you to observe internally your physical posture. So you're not opening your eyes and looking down. You're just feeling, am I upright? Am I slumped? Am I going side to side? And whatever you observe is fine. And Matt, you're going to kind of represent the audience sharing what you observe. And if you observe nothing, that's fine also.
Sure.
Okay, so I want the real answers to what you observed. And then I'll tell you what audiences, when I do this live, have said. Then I'll ask you to observe your breathing. And is it shallow? Is it deep? Is it erratic? And again, whatever you observe is fine. Then I'll ask you to observe if you have any pain anywhere and where it is. And some people do, some people don't. And then I'll ask you to observe what's going on in the mind. Is it calm? Is it churning? Is it all over the place? Again, whatever you personally observe is fine. I'll have you share, and then I'll share what audiences tend to say. And so, are you ready to play, Matt?
Yes, I'm ready to play. Let's go.
Okay, so I want you standing. And can you put the camera so it'll be on you while I'm talking? Uh,
Yeah.
okay. Uh, so if people have us side by side, you'll see both of us there. So if you want to use that kind of setting, you can for this part now. And so I want you now close your eyes, and everybody who's doing this and participating. And I want you to think of a negative, stressful thought. And now intensify that negative thought. And without adjusting your body, just observe your physical posture. Observe your breathing. Observe any pain you feel in your body and where it is. And observe what's going on in your mind. Now, open your eyes, Matt. You can be seated for a moment, and for those who are watching, they can be seated as well. So, what, if anything, did you observe physical posture?
I became more slouched a little bit.
Yeah. And that's what people tend to say. They use the word slumped, slouched, slump. Yeah. Okay. Breathing. What'd you observe there, if anything?
Shallow breathing, more like well, almost like very tensed up, very tense.
Tense. Okay. And people tend to say shallow.
Mm.
Did you notice any pain anywhere? Some do, some don't.
Yeah, in like the solar plexus area, it kind of tensed up, like the lower lower back, and also the upper like tummy area, like that was kind of tensed up.
Okay. And what is there going on in the mind?
Just kind of one focusedness on this negativity that it just that was all encompassing, distracting.
Okay. And people will tend to say the word churning.
Mm.
But what you're describing is, it was distracting and I couldn't
Yeah.
get beyond. So you, in effect, noticed in all four areas. What I'm hoping is your viewers noticed in at least one area. And so what we're going to come back to now is switching over to a very positive thought. Okay. Very, very positive thought for yourself. So you're going to stand up again now, Matt. And viewers, if you'll stand up and or sit towards the front of your chair, and I want you to think of a very positive thought. And so close your eyes and think of that thought, and really intensify that thought. And again, without adjusting your body, Just observe the physical posture. Your breathing. Any pain you feel in your body and where it is. And what's going on in your mind. Okay, open your eyes, be seated, Matt, and everybody can be seated as well.
I love this.
So, Matt, don't give it away yet. So, what do you observe physical posture-wise?
um, kind of broaden the shoulder and be straight up.
Yeah, so people will tend to say upright when I do live programs. What did you notice breathing?
More calmer, normal breathing, deeper breathing even.
Yeah, and that's what people tend to say, deeper. What did you notice pain-wise this time? Because you noticed the stomach and the solar plexus. So no pain?
No pain at all.
Great. So the question is pain in the mind or is pain in the body? I actually think it's in both places, but the mind can have a tremendous impact on the body. And what did you notice in terms of the mind?
Very calm, receptive, alert.
And people tend to say calm. Now, Matt, did we rehearse any of this before we just did this?
No.
Now, I didn't tell you what we were going to do, what I wanted you to notice. So, but your responses are similar to when I do a live program to what people actually notice. So now your question was, what can we do about when we've got this negative stuff going on?
Yeah.
So we're going to come to the brain gyms now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put you in 2 brain gyms we're going to do now to get rid of the charge attached to that negative thought. The first brain gym is called hookups. There's a part 1 and a part 2, and the second one will be positive points. So I want you and everybody to join us in doing this now, okay? You might want to move your chair back just a little bit from a desk, okay? And we're going to stay seated for this. So what I want you to do, I want you to clasp your hands together. So everybody has one thumb on top. So what you're going to do, we're going to call that whole side of your body the primary side of your body. So now you're releasing your hands. You're going to put your arms straight out in front of you. I'm going to bring my arms in just so you can see what I'm doing now. So your arms are straight out in front of you. Turn the backs of your hands towards each other. Take the primary side hand over the top of the other. Intertwine your fingers. Bring your hands under and into your chest. If you can't get them up there, just keep them out. That's fine. Take your primary side ankle and cross it in front of the other ankle.
Yes.
You're going to put your tongue to the roof of the mouth, 1/4 of an inch behind your front teeth, just making contact. And what I want you to do is I want you to think of that negative, stressful thought negatively. As much intensity, as much clarity as you can, negatively. Somewhere in doing hookups, part 1, part 2 are the positive points. The negative will fade away. Other thoughts will pop in. Your mind will wander off. It becomes hard to focus on the negative. When that happens, you switch and you view it positively. But start with the negative, stay with the negative until you get a switch, disappear, can't find. Then go positive for the rest of the process. We're just going to hold this for about 30 seconds more, and then I'll give you the next instruction.
It is strange because it's hard to think negatively about it.
Yeah, just stay with it. And we'll let your listeners stay with what they're doing, the viewers. Okay, release your hands, everybody, uncross your feet. Part 2 of hookups, you're going to put your fingertips together, just your fingertips. Your hands can be up in the air, in your lap. It's whatever you're comfortable with. Your tongue will still be at the roof of the mouth, 1/4 of an inch behind your front teeth. You're going to keep breathing. You close your eyes. If the negative is still there, continue to view it negatively. Mind wanders off, other thoughts pop in, hard to view the negative, switch and view it positively. Stay with that. We're going to hold that for 30 seconds. And when it switches to positive, stay positive the rest of the process. Close your eyes. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Okay, release your hands, open your eyes. The last thing we're going to do, Matt, is called positive points. To do positive points, you'll take 3 fingers of each hand. You're going to find your middle of your eyebrow, go halfway up to the hairline or where it used to be. You have the curved part of the head. So notice my fingers are about an inch and a half, 2 inches apart. It's where the curve of the head is. I'm placing my fingers there gently. So I'm touching, but it is light, no movement. And if the negative is still there, continue to view it negatively. Mind wanders off, other thoughts pop in, switch and view it positively. Close your eyes. We're going to hold this for 30 seconds. Okay, release your hands, open your eyes. So, Matt, we're going to have you stand up and our viewers stand up with you or sit to the front of your chair again. So, stand up and close your eyes and think of the thought that you started with, that negative, stressful thought. I want you to think of that again. And while you're thinking of it, observe your physical posture. Your breathing. Any pain you feel in your body and where it is. And what's going on in your mind. Okay, open your eyes. Everybody can be seated. Okay, so Matt, what did you observe physical posture this time?
Physical posture, quite normal, quite balanced.
So upright again?
Yes.
Breathing?
Breathing, normal, deep.
Deeper?
Deep.
Was the pain there or did it come back? Or it's gone?
The pain overall wasn't there. It was just like a tiny speck on my, I don't know if this is related, but on my right side of my stomach area, there was a little bit of tingling or something, but I don't know if this is related to what I'm thinking of or this is unrelated.
Right. And what about the mind?
Peaceful, like it was nothing.
Yeah.
It was strange because just 5 minutes ago I thought of this and it was just like, and now I'm like searching in my mind, like, is this the same event? Like, what is this?
Yeah, literally it's hard to go back to the negative.
Yeah.
That's why I did all the research, by the way, on the Switched On Selling seminar, because what I discovered is people forgot how they used to be because they were no longer wired up to the negative. They were now wired up to the positive, and there was no connection to the negative. Now, notice for your viewers, Matt said it was pretty much changed from the very first part of hookups, correct?
Right, correct.
But we do all of it because it might not be until we do positive points that the change actually occurs. Now, what did you folks observe for yourself? And Would you say, Matt, you are now way closer to the positive thought, that very positive thought, than you were to the negative when you started?
Oh yeah, like the difference was almost like night and day. Like
Yeah.
the very first thing what we did, which I thought was very cool with the hands and all that, like immediately there was, it was hard to think of it in a negative way because the mind just went in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that cool?
It is amazing.
Yeah. And so the question becomes, is it gone? And is it gone forever? The negative. And the answer is probably yes, but maybe not. If it's not gone, just to hook up some positive points again. And you'll get rid of it again. At some point, maybe second time or third time, if it's not gone, and most of the time it's gone the first time because you switched it. It's not hooked up anymore. For you, I'd recommend just doing another 30 seconds of each, and that little tingling pain you had, that'll be gone too,
Right.
if it was related to this at all. And it may not have been. But anyway, so this is to show you, and some of this is in my materials, the Switched On Selling book. Can I actually give people a little tour of some of the books I've got?
Sure. Go ahead.
So let me get back here. So I've done a bunch of them just to show you some of them. So if you want to get them, you can see. So this one is Managing Your Stress in Difficult Times, Succeeding in Times of Change. This one is the one that Dr. David Hawkins recommends. It's solely on the muscle check and called Switched On Living. Easy ways to use the mind-body connection to energize your life. That we talked about Switched On Networking, goes through the entire networking process and uses the brain gym to switch you on. Switched On Selling does the same thing in the sales process. And the last one is Brain Gym for Business that I did with Dr. Paul and Gail Dennison. For folks who want to pursue the internet marketing course that's online, you can go to switchedoninternetmarketing.com. If you want to look at Switched On Startup Entrepreneur, it'd be Switched On Startup Entrepreneur.com. If you want to look at the books, the music, the subliminals, all that stuff, you'll find that at teplitz.com, Teplitz.com. Yay!
Wonderful. I think we covered everything that everything that we wanted to cover. I think we covered it.
Great.
It's been a
Yay.
success. I want to thank you so much again for being on the podcast. And yeah, because I know it's a small podcast, but it is growing, and I think people need to hear of your work because I think it is very important in the world, very important.
Well, thank you. I've been at this for a long time, and my view has always been the more the merrier, because literally we can make people merry.
Right. Well, I want to thank you again for being on the podcast, and for the listeners and or watchers, thank you for watching or listening. Thank you.